It was Christmas of 1965 in the Spanish city of Murcia, and 12-year-old Piedad was already carrying the weight of an adult. She was the third of 10 living siblings, 11 if you counted the baby boy who had died years earlier, and the oldest girl in a family struggling to survive. Her two older brothers, 16-year-old José Antonio and 14-year-old Manuel, had left school to work long hours at an auto body shop. The family lived in a cramped apartment in the Tuf El Carmen neighborhood, a slight improvement over the slums they'd occupied before. Their mother was 7 months pregnant, their father away at work, and Piedad was left in charge of the household. She cooked, cleaned, bathed the youngest children, and kept the family going while the adults earned what little they could. Her days were a blur of chores and caretaking. She soothed the baby, 9-month-old Maria del Carmen, chased after 2-year-old Mariano and 5-year-old Andres, and tried to keep the others, Jesus, Cristina, Manuela, and Fuensanta, fed and clothed. On top of everything, her brothers brought home metal parts from the shop for her to polish with a mysterious chemical paste, tiny bars of some industrial compound she rubbed over the cold steel while the younger children played at her feet. No one thought much of it. Life was hard, but ordinary, until December turned deadly. On the morning of December 4th, baby Maria suddenly spiked a fever. Within 30 minutes, her skin was blotched with a deep purple rash, her tiny body convulsing in violent seizures. By the time the doctor arrived, she was gone. He called it meningitis. 5 days later, Mariano followed the same terrifying path: fever, rash, convulsions, death. Again, the doctor blamed meningitis, but whispers began to ripple through the neighborhood. When little Fuensanta, only 4 years old, died just days later under identical circumstances, even the doctor began to doubt. He ordered further tests and left her death certificate unsigned. The neighbors, terrified of contagion, kept their distance as the family was whisked off to the provincial hospital for observation. Doctors tested everyone, searching for some hidden infection. Journalists came, bringing dolls and comic books for the surviving children, and newspapers splashed the mystery illness across their front pages. Yet no one could find a trace of disease. Autopsies revealed nothing. The bodies were exhumed, samples re-examined. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Each child had died exactly 5 days apart, from youngest to oldest. And then, just after New Year's, it happened again. 5-year-old Andres fell sick and died within half an hour. This time, the investigators moved fast. Tissue samples went to Madrid's National Institute of Toxicology, where scientists discovered lethal levels of DDT and potassium cyanide. The children had been poisoned. Shock rippled through Spain. Who could be doing this? On January 14th, police arrested the parents, Andres and Antonia. Because Antonia was heavily pregnant, she was held in a hospital ward while Andres underwent psychiatric evaluation. The surviving children were split between them, the boys with their father, the girls with their mother. It was a desperate attempt to protect the children and perhaps catch the killer in the act. Reporters descended on the hospital, astonished to find the siblings laughing and playing. 6-year-old Manuela even looked straight into a photographer's lens and declared with eerie calm, "You want my picture because I'm going to die next." Detectives, however, were watching someone else. Piedad seemed different, cool, detached, calculating. She had been the last to see each victim alive, always the one to feed them when the parents and older brothers were away. But suspicion isn't proof. One clever detective invited her to a cafe on January 24th. As they talked, he playfully pretended to drop a piece of the polishing bar into her glass of milk. Piedad's eyes flashed. She grabbed his wrist and hissed, "Don't do that." You could seriously hurt someone. "Is it dangerous?" the detective asked softly. "Like the stuff you gave your little brothers and sisters?" The silence stretched until Piedad finally said, almost matter-of-factly, "It was me. I killed the 4 of them. The first 3 because my mother told me to. The last one, that was just me." Calmly, she described how she rolled bits of the chemical bars, laced with potassium cyanide, into tiny balls and mixed them with insecticide powders rich in DDT. She stirred the poison into food and milk and fed it to the little ones. The pain, doctors later confirmed, must have been excruciating, death arriving within 30 minutes. 4-year-old Fuensanta had even pleaded, "Quick, come here, I'm dying." But Piedad never moved. Her shifting stories soon cleared her mother of involvement, but Piedad herself never showed remorse. In the psychiatric ward, she laughed easily and charmed the staff. Tests showed she knew right from wrong, yet chose cruelty anyway. That summer, she was formally declared a psychopath. One explanation she gave seemed the most truthful. She was tired of the endless childcare and wanted time to play with her friends. Because of her age, the court could not convict her as an adult. She was committed to a Catholic convent for troubled girls until she turned 21. By all accounts, she adapted well, knitting for hours and befriending the nuns. When she was finally released, she vanished from public record. Some whispered she became a nun herself. Others believed she assumed a new identity. If alive today, she would be 71. The rest of the family never escaped the shadow of those murders. Several brothers drifted into crime. One even jailed for murder, and their parents lived out their years in poverty and illness. The name Piedad, which ironically means mercy in Spanish, faded into obscurity. But the memory of the girl who poisoned her own siblings still chills anyone who hears her story. What would you do if someone so young could commit something so cold? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.